The concept of censoring information has been around for centuries, dating back to around 399 BCE with the Greek philosopher Socrates, who was widely regarded as being one of the founding fathers of modern-day philosophy. His teachings, having revolutionized the way philosophy is understood, was tried for supposedly corrupting the youth in a mockery of sacred objects and executed just days later. Since Socrates, there have been numerous cases of countries and even organizations censoring information with numbers possibly reaching millions and perhaps even higher. One of the best-known tales documenting censorship of information comes from the 1953 novel of Fahrenheit 451, which was written and released by Ray Bradbury in 1953. This story tells a tale of rejecting societal norms in the search for knowledge in a world where books are illegal and those unwilling to accept the rules are harshly punished. However, information censorship is not only held by the bounds of fiction, but by leaders of worlds. In 1994, citizens of the People's Republic of China were introduced to the World Wide Web for the very first time, allowing them to look into history, new topics, and answer questions they may have never known the answers to previously. However, this sudden influx of information created problems for the Chinese government, who had been trying to hide information they deemed was either harmful to national security or to state interests. In other words, information that directly questioned the carefully built facade of Chinese success and prosperity, leading to the government implementing methods of censorship just 2 to 3 years later in both 1996 and 1997.
Obviously is still
This is David Zhang. Born in the People's Republic of China, he moved to the United States in 2006 at the age of 11, becoming a journalist after graduating college with the goal of covering the rampant corruption, unsafe cultures, and censorship involved in China. Since then, he has amassed over 1.4 million followers on the internet, and earlier this week, I had the opportunity to talk to him and ask him his thoughts and opinions on certain topics and subjects.
sort of a journey to discover together with my fans on what's happening in a country across the Pacific Ocean. Yeah, so China built something, it's called the firewall of censorship. It started really in the early 2000s when internet technologies began to advance. And in the early days, the purpose was very simple. It was to prevent information that they didn't want it to go public to be seen by Chinese people. So what they would do is they will block certain websites. But actually, during the early 2000s and even the 2010s, the access to those information was relatively still free compared to today. But as obviously, as the years go by, there's more focus on micro control, things that, for example, keywords, search terms, even contents. They've sort of over the years built up more and more, and even smaller sort of emphasis on the information that's being allowed to go out. I'll give you a great example. There's been American companies like Facebook and Google that's tried to go to China, same with Yahoo. And you've seen over the years, they've had to come out or exit China for the simple fact that, the amount of requirements that these companies would have to go through as based on the Chinese standards, not the American standards, was too costly. And it's sacrificing the freedom of speech. And I think within China right now, there is a huge focus on controlling what people in China think, what people in China can see, and what people in China consume. So that is largely controlled day to day by the censorship or the cyber administration of China. And they actually put out guidelines. They have workers. They have hundreds of thousands of internet moderators, you could think of them as, but for controlling the general flow of information. Yeah, so people might think that the primary goal is something like preventing people from talking about certain things or preventing things like, say, the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre from being talked about. Well, those things are considered lower level because it's so common that people know not to talk about them, that they don't necessarily focus too much on it because that's sort of a long-term focus. The immediate, I guess, focus for the Chinese government is to prevent current ongoing events from becoming hot topics. I'll give you a great example is the Chinese Twitter, or the Chinese X equivalent, is called Weibo. And on Weibo, you have trending searches across the board every single day, and it's updated constantly. For example, there was recently a Chinese celebrity. He was his death was very mysterious. There's a lot of issues surrounding his death and discussions about it. That is quickly controlled and suppressed to prevent any sort of overreaction from the Chinese internet users. And in doing so, they can almost manipulate how things appear online. And so it's a big emphasis on the current news of the day. So if you take that and you say, well, what happens in a span of 5 years or so? Well, then you create those general problems where people have almost like a void in their memory as to what exactly happened on this particular day, or what exactly happened in this year. They can create that long-term effect as well, but more of the focus is the up-to-date current situations. Yeah, it's a great question, because I think with the advancement of AI, China has already been ahead in terms of using massive amount of data to regulate information online. And so with the introduction of AI, it's much easier for them to do so, and the responses are much quicker. Now, if you're asking me what's going to happen in 10 years from now on, I think, well, I hope that the censorship wall will crumble, obviously, but if it still stays, I think people have actually figured out ways to bypass them. For example, they use homonyms or terms similar, abbreviations, insinuations, those type of things to deliver the message, to talk almost like you're kind of talking, but your meanings are different. So they're trying to kind of get information across. And the use of VPNs, even though VPNs are officially illegal in China unless you are part of you do academic research, or you're part of the government, you could use that. But people use VPN to bypass the censorship firewall and to go see news outside of China. There's actually something I'm not affiliated with, but I'm trying to promote. It's actually a group of engineers in the United States. They're working on something where basically they can send in information to China to allow them to bypass the firewall with just a click of a button. So it's just a single link. So you see this technology confrontation. You have the people who are working to censor the information. Then you have people who are coming up with technology to bypass that. So I think at the end of the day, it's very hard to predict who's going to win at the end. But I hope that, one day we won't have to have this conversation, and that the firewall of censorship is no more. I think now if it was 10 years ago, I would say pretty efficient. Nowadays, as I mentioned, with VPNs, with even a lot of these content circulating secretly inside Chinese social media and chat softwares, I'd say is much less efficient. And I think there is only so much you can control before people find new ways to find those information. So I would say now, if you had to put it into a 1 to 10 on a scale, I would say somewhere around a 7. Whereas, say, 10 years ago, it was more like an 8.5 to a 9. I think that's a good measure to put it at. Right. I think it's a very systemic problem. So it's not like if one leader replaces another that this somehow will get better. The degree of censorship could change, get severe, or get less based on who is in power. But I think the overall need or desire for information to be controlled didn't just start today. It started on day one of the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party's control and power. So it is just as days evolved, they found new ways to do so. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right with that assessment. If there is a complete, collapse of the current Chinese system, then we can definitely see a change in the censorship. But if we just say that one leader steps down, another one comes back up, I don't think that we're going to see the end of it. I simply think we might see some adjustments. Very great question. The reason it's so good is because China is very good at building an image of itself. Just like the same way that Hollywood portrays America. Every country has this idea of how it wants to be seen on the world stage. So China's version is by censoring information that can be, for example, available to people, so that people are only receiving certain information they tend to agree with what the government says or what the government wants them to see. In doing so, they gain, quote unquote, this massive support for the government. And so then the CCP or the Chinese government uses that manufactured support to create almost an advertisement on the world stage to say that, hey, look, we have 100% support from our people, or we have a 99%, participation in certain things, blah, blah, blah. Now, if anyone that lives outside of China knows that it's much better if you can challenge, you can debate, you can call out mistakes from the government, much like what the United States, Western countries can do in a democracy. That's the correct way for things to move forward. But China does so in the sense that they want you to see a packaged, beautiful, perfect side of China. And when you do try to point out any flaws, they simply try to defend it by saying that, no, that's not true, because here, let me present to you the information I want you to see.
Fahrenheit 451 is a book full of double meanings. The opening line, the very first words you read upon opening the book, "It was a pleasure to burn." This is a line which represents the burning of information. In the book, it relates to the physical destruction of literature through fire, while in the context of Chinese censorship, represents the Chinese firewall. You also have the character of Captain Beatty, the chief fireman, who could be used to represent the Chinese government, and the mechanical hound, which is a device used by the firemen to chase after those who have broken the law, which is self-indicative of any ordinary police or government department. Some more lines from the book that put forward the concept of internet censorship are: "We stand against the small tide of those who want to make everyone unhappy with conflicting theory and thought," which was said by Captain Beatty on page 59 of my copy. Another quote, which can be used in this context, also comes from page 59. "We depend on you. I don't think you realize how important we are, to our happy world as it stands now." This can be interpreted as sort of brainwashing. They have been brainwashed to the point where they think that a lack of information is happy, is good, is needed for their society. Fahrenheit 451 may be a book from over 70 years ago, but it still remains a facet in modern literature today, thanks to its theme of suppressing knowledge and punishing those who stand up and rebel against the system. Something that tragically remains very, very prevalent even to this day. Thank you all for watching. I hope you learned something. And I want to give a huge and special thank you to David Zhang of our China Insider. I will leave a link down to his channel in the description if you want to check him out. A lot of this video would not have been possible without him, and I want to thank you. And I want you all to show him some support, show him some love. That's about it. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you later.